It is past midnight, somewhere on the frozen frontier of the Roman Empire. Outside the tent, 10,000 soldiers sleep in the mud, waiting for a war that never seems to end. Inside, one man sits alone at a small wooden desk. He is the most powerful human being on the face of the earth. He commands legions. He commands provinces. He commands the fate of nations with a single word. And yet tonight, he is not thinking about any of that. He dips his pen, and by the light of a single flame, he writes a sentence meant for no one but himself. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He does not know that 18 centuries later, that sentence will still be quoted. He does not know that a private journal he never intended to publish, written in the middle of plague, war, betrayal, and grief, will become one of the most read books in human history. His name is Marcus Aurelius, and what he wrote in that tent wasn't philosophy for a classroom. It was survival. It was a man talking himself through the worst years of his life, one sentence at a time. Today we're opening that journal. 15 lines, 15 moments where an emperor stripped himself down to the truth. And by the end of this video, at least one of them is going to hit you so hard you'll have to pause and sit with it. Let's begin. Welcome back to Wisdom of the Stoics, the home for anyone trying to build an unshakable mind in an unstable world. Here we take the oldest, hardest-earned wisdom on earth, from Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, and we translate it into something you can actually use tomorrow morning. If that's why you're here, hit subscribe now, because what we're about to go through today is some of the deepest material this channel has ever covered. Let's get into it. Section 1. You have power over your mind, the quote that starts everything. Every single idea in Stoicism, if you trace it back far enough, comes back to one sentence. It's the one we just heard in the cold open, and it deserves its own moment before we move forward. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Think about what Marcus was actually facing when he wrote this. The Antonine Plague was killing thousands a day across the empire. Some historians believe it eventually killed 5 million people. Germanic tribes were pouring across the border. His own trusted general, Avidius Cassius, would later betray him and try to seize the throne. This wasn't a man meditating in a quiet garden. This was a man drowning in circumstances he could not control, and his answer to all of it wasn't to fix the plague. It wasn't to end the war. It was to draw a single brutal line down the middle of reality. On one side, the things that happen to you. On the other, how you respond to them. Only one side of that line is yours. The moment you forget that, the moment you start believing you're entitled to control the weather, other people's opinions, the market, your health, your reputation, you hand your peace of mind over to things that were never yours to control in the first place. Here's a modern version of the same trap. Picture someone stuck in traffic on the way to a job interview. Their jaw is clenched. Their hands are gripping the wheel. They're rehearsing arguments with a traffic system that cannot hear them. None of that anger moves a single car, but it does raise their blood pressure, drain their focus, and guarantee they walk into that interview already exhausted before a single question is even asked. Marcus would say, the traffic was never yours to control. Your response to it always was, and that response is the only place your power has ever lived. So here's the first question I want you to sit with, and I want you to actually answer it in the comments. What is one thing you've been fighting to control this week that was never actually yours to control? Naming it is the first step to putting the weight down. Section 2. Memento Mori, the death that teaches you how to live. If the first idea is about where your power lives, the second idea is about time, specifically, how little of it any of us actually have. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This is one of the most quoted lines from Meditations, and it's also one of the most misread. People hear memento mori, remember you must die, and they assume it's supposed to be depressing. It isn't. It's supposed to be clarifying. Marcus wasn't writing this as a man afraid of death. He was writing it as a man trying to filter out everything trivial from his life by holding it up against the one certainty none of us can escape. If you might genuinely leave this life today, would you still spend the next hour scrolling through a feed that makes you feel worse about yourself? Would you still swallow the words you've been meaning to say to someone you love? Would you still put off the thing you've been telling yourself you'll start next Monday? There's a story, maybe partly legend, but the lesson holds regardless, about Roman generals returning from a triumphant war campaign, riding through the streets of Rome to wild celebration. And behind the general's chariot stood a slave whose entire job was to lean forward every so often and whisper into the general's ear, "Remember, you are only a man. Remember, you will die," not to humiliate him, to keep him honest, to keep the loudest cheering crowd in the world from convincing him he was something more than mortal. Most of us don't have that slave whispering in our ear. We have Instagram whispering the opposite, telling us we have unlimited time, unlimited chances, unlimited tomorrows. Marcus Aurelius is that whisper you're missing, not to scare you, to sharpen you. Here's the practical version of this. Tonight, before you go to sleep, ask yourself one honest question. If this were the last week of your life, what would you stop tolerating? Not stop doing, stop tolerating. The people who drain you, the job that numbs you, the apology you never gave. Death isn't the point of memento mori. Urgency is. Section 3. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. There's a very specific kind of person Marcus Aurelius had almost zero patience for, the person who talks about virtue instead of living it. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. This line is short and it's meant to land like a slap. Marcus spent his entire life surrounded by philosophers, men who could debate the nature of virtue for hours, cite every Greek thinker who came before them, win every argument in the room. And in his private journal, he essentially tells himself, none of that matters if you don't act. We live in the most philosophically talkative era in human history. Anyone can quote Stoicism. Anyone can post a Marcus Aurelius quote over a sunset photo. But quoting wisdom and living wisdom are two completely different disciplines, and the gap between them is where most people quietly get stuck for years. Think about someone who has watched dozens of videos on discipline, read the books, saved the quotes, and can explain the concept of the dichotomy of control better than most professors, but still hits snooze 5 times. Every morning, still hasn't had the hard conversation they've been avoiding. Still hasn't started the business plan sitting in their notes app for 2 years. Marcus isn't talking to the people who don't know better. He's talking directly to that person, the one who knows exactly what to do and simply hasn't done it yet. This is the part of the video where I'd ask you to be honest with yourself, not with me. What's one piece of wisdom you already believe that you have not yet turned into action? You don't need another video explaining it better. You need to be the man or woman who does it. Section 4. The obstacle is the way, turning blocks into fuel. Now we get to one of the most famous and most misunderstood passages in the entire book. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This isn't motivational poster positivity. Marcus wasn't saying obstacles are secretly good things in disguise. He was describing something much more precise, the mind's ability to convert resistance into material. A fire doesn't get extinguished by things thrown on top of it. It consumes them and burns brighter. Marcus said the disciplined mind works the same way. It treats every obstacle as fuel rather than a wall. Here's a story that shows exactly what this looks like in practice, without needing to name anyone real. Imagine a young craftsman whose workshop burns down the night before his biggest order is due. Everything, his tools, his materials, his half-finished work, gone. He has every right to fall apart. Instead, he spends the night making a list. Which of his old clients still owe him small favors? Which materials he can borrow? Which parts of the order can be simplified without breaking his word? He delivers the order 3 days late with an honest explanation. The client, moved by his composure under disaster, becomes his biggest advocate for the next decade. The fire didn't become good. It was still a disaster. But the way he metabolized it, instead of the disaster metabolizing him, became the turning point of his career. This is what Marcus meant. Not everything happens for a reason. Something closer to, whatever happens, you get to decide what it becomes fuel for. A setback at work can become fuel for reinvention. A breakup can become fuel for self-respect you didn't have before. A public failure can become fuel for the kind of humility that actually makes people trust you more, not less. If you're in the middle of an obstacle right now, and I'd guess a good number of you watching are, I want you to comment one word describing what it is. Not the whole story, just the word. Sometimes naming the obstacle out loud is the first step in turning it into fuel, instead of letting it stay a wall. Section 5. On anger, people who wrong you, and the freedom of not reacting. If there's one section of Meditations that feels like it was written directly for the 21st century, it's the passages on dealing with difficult people. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. This might be the most quietly radical sentence in the entire book. Because Marcus isn't saying this to become cynical. He's saying it so that when those people inevitably show up, and they always do, you're not shocked, wounded, or thrown off balance. You expected it. You planned for it. Their behavior is now information, not injury. Think about how much emotional energy the average person spends every single day being surprised that other people are difficult. The coworker who takes credit for your idea. The family member who criticizes you the moment you walk in the door. The stranger online who twists your words into something you never said. Every time we're shocked by this, we bleed energy we didn't need to spend. Marcus's solution wasn't to become bitter about human nature. It was to expect friction the way a sailor expects waves, so that when it comes, you're already braced, already steady, already unbothered. And there's a second layer to this that's even more powerful. It is not that a thing is difficult that makes us unhappy. It is because we let the actions of others disturb our tranquility. Somebody cutting you off in traffic doesn't ruin your day. Your decision to carry that anger for the next 4 hours does. Somebody's rude comment in a meeting doesn't define you. Your decision to replay it in your head all night does. Marcus is drawing your attention to a truth most people never examine. The initial event is almost always brief. It's the second, self-inflicted event, the rumination, the resentment, the imagined argument you have in the shower 3 hours later, that actually does the damage. And that second event is entirely optional. Here's a practical filter you can start using this week. The next time someone wrongs you, ask yourself one question before you react. Is this person acting out of malice or out of their own confusion and suffering? Marcus believed almost everyone falls into the second category. People who feel secure rarely feel the need to tear others down. The people who wound us are, almost without exception, wounded themselves. That doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does something more useful than excusing it. It removes your need to take it personally. Section 6. The view from above. Shrinking your problems by expanding your view. There's a mental exercise Marcus returns to again and again throughout Meditations, and modern Stoic teachers now call it the view from above. Consider the vastness of time and space, and reflect on the smallness of your own affairs within it. Marcus would imagine himself rising above his own body, above his palace, above Rome, above the empire, until the entire known world shrank to the size of a coin, and every conflict, every insult, every crisis he was facing shrank along with it. Not because those things weren't real, but because scale changes everything about how a problem feels. Try this for yourself right now. Think of whatever has been eating at you the most this week. A disagreement, a mistake, an insult, a fear. Now imagine that same worry from 10,000 feet in the air, looking down at your entire city. Now imagine it from space, looking down at the whole curve of the earth. Now, imagine it from the perspective of someone 100 years from now. looking back at this exact moment in your life. Does it still feel as large? This isn't a trick to make you feel like your problems don't matter. It's a tool to help you see them at their actual size, instead of the artificially inflated size your nervous system gives them in the heat of the moment. Marcus used this exercise before major decisions, before battles, before confrontations with people trying to provoke him. He would zoom out until the panic became perspective. There's something almost strangely comforting in this. Emperors have felt small against the size of the universe. Slaves have felt small against the size of the universe. Every person who has ever lived, no matter how much power or how little they held, has been the same size against eternity. That isn't a depressing thought. It's a deeply equalizing one. It means the anxiety keeping you up tonight, however enormous it feels, has never once been bigger than everyone else's has felt to them. You are not uniquely crushed by the scale of your problems. You are simply human, feeling the very human trick your mind plays when it forgets how big the world actually is. Section 7. Amor fati, loving what happens to you, even the parts you didn't choose. We're heading into the final stretch now, and this next idea might be the hardest one in the entire video to actually practice, which is exactly why it matters so much. Love the discipline you know and let it support you. This idea gets expanded by later Stoics into a phrase you may have heard before: amor fati, the love of fate. Not the tolerance of fate, not the grim acceptance of fate, the love of it, including the parts that hurt. This sounds almost impossible until you look at how it actually plays out. Consider someone who gets passed over for a promotion they were certain they'd earned. Every instinct tells them to resent it, the company, the boss, the co-worker who got it instead. But there is another way to hold that same event as the exact push needed to finally leave a job. They'd outgrown 2 years, go and start something of their own. Nothing about the rejection changes. What changes is the relationship to it. Amor fati doesn't ask you to pretend the rejection didn't hurt. It asks you to eventually recognize it as a hinge point your life needed, even if you couldn't see that on the day it happened. Marcus wasn't writing this from a position of comfort. He buried multiple children. He ruled during a plague that emptied entire cities. He spent nearly 2 decades at war instead of in the philosophy he actually loved. If anyone had the right to resent his fate, it was him. And instead, his journal keeps circling back to the same idea. What has been given to you, all of it, the beautiful and the brutal, is exactly the material your character was built to work with, not despite the hardship. Because of it, you don't have to love your hardest chapter today. Amor fati isn't a demand for instant gratitude. It's a direction to walk toward, the slow, patient practice of turning "why did this happen to me" into "what is this making me capable of?" That shift alone, even attempted imperfectly, changes how heavy the same exact life feels to carry. Section 8. The inner citadel, the one place no one can touch. We've covered control, mortality, obstacles, other people, perspective and fate. Now we arrive at the idea that holds all of it together, the concept. Marcus Aurelius returns to more than almost any other in the entire book. The inner citadel. Nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. Picture Marcus in that tent again from the opening of this video. Outside, war, disease, betrayal, a crumbling frontier. Inside, a mind he has spent years fortifying, one sentence at a time, until it became a place nothing outside could fully reach. That's the inner citadel. Not a physical fortress, a psychological one, built slab by slab out of the ideas we've walked through today. Every time you remind yourself what is and isn't within your control, you add a stone to that wall. Every time you refuse to let someone else's cruelty dictate your peace, you add another. Every time you shrink a crisis back down to its true size through perspective, another stone. Every time you choose to work with your fate instead of against it, another. Here's the part most people miss about this idea. The citadel isn't something you're born with. Marcus wasn't calm because he had an easy life. You've heard exactly how untrue that is by now. He was calm because he built the wall on purpose, deliberately, sentence by sentence. In a journal no one was ever supposed to read. That journal wasn't written to teach the world. It was written because one man needed somewhere private to keep constructing his own fortress, one difficult night at a time. That's what this channel exists to help you do. Every video, every quote, every idea, it's another stone. You're not just watching a video about a Roman emperor. You are, quote by quote, building the same kind of fortress inside your own mind. Whether you're facing a plague or just a Monday that feels unbearably heavy. Let's go back to that tent one more time. Marcus Aurelius closes his journal that night. The candle burned low, the ink barely dry. Tomorrow the plague is still spreading. The war has not ended. The betrayal from his own general is still years away, waiting for him. Nothing about his external circumstances has changed in the time it took him to write that page. But something internal has. He is a fraction steadier than he was an hour ago, a fraction clearer, a fraction more prepared for whatever tomorrow decides to throw at the most powerful man in the world, who, by the end of his life, still described himself as nothing more than a student of philosophy, doing his best. That's the real secret hiding inside Meditations. It was never a book of answers. It was one man's private proof that even an emperor has to fight for his own peace of mind. One sentence, one page, one difficult night at a time, and that the fight is never actually finished. You don't arrive at the inner citadel and live there forever. You return to it again and again, exactly the way Marcus did, exactly the way we've done together in this video. So here is what I'll leave you with. Out of everything we covered today, control, mortality, obstacles, other people, perspective, fate, the citadel, one of these ideas is sitting with you more than the others right now. I want you to tell me which one and why in the comments below. Not for the algorithm, because this channel is built by people who are genuinely trying to think more clearly, and your answer might be exactly what someone else scrolling through these comments needs to read today. If this video gave you even one sentence worth carrying into tomorrow, do 3 things before you go. Hit like, so more people looking for this kind of clarity can find it. Subscribe, because we release new explorations into Stoic philosophy every single week. And this channel is built specifically for minds like yours. And share this with the one person you know who's fighting their own version of that tent right now, their own plague, their own war, their own long night that won't seem to end. Marcus Aurelius never intended for any of us to read his private thoughts, but he left them anyway. And nearly 2,000 years later, they found exactly the person who needed them. Maybe tonight, that person is you. Thank you for watching Wisdom of the Stoics. Stay disciplined, stay steady, and I'll see you in the next one.